All right, so like I just said in the chat, I'm happy to take questions, conversations, side quests. The talk is about only 20 minutes, so we do have time. And I'm not very familiar with Second Life, so please be kind, but I know you will be. Oops, Daisy. And yeah, we'll start in about a minute, I think. Let me see if my speakeasy works. Yes, it does. Uh, Right, in case there's a crisis or my computer crashes, which is reasonably likely, the slide that you see on the thing has my blog post, so this whole thing is on there, as well as an audio recording, um, so you're covered either way. Right, it's on the hour, so I think we'll start. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for coming to join us today. The title of my talk is Emergent Education as Metaplay, or alternatively, education as an emergent game where metagaming is core to play. I'm trying to hang on my. Yeah, you're welcome to ask questions throughout. We can have a conversation. And yeah, so through exploring playing with the physical world, morphing and changing it through games can allow us to learn about the world, not through a top-down education, but through a curiosity that does not even have to involve the truth. Through these games, we can build a new sense of community and belonging that builds a common language across polarized opinions, because it's just for fun, after all. Exploring the world is great and all that, but poking fun at at exploring the world, oh hell yes! And that's quoting Mike Soden. And just to say again, on the blog, there's hyperlinks to all these things that I'm saying, so you can go and dive deeper. So this talk is structured in three parts. The first part is just to explain what I mean with these core concepts, emergent, education, and metaplay. So emergence, emergent games refer to a type of gameplay that arises from the interactions and behaviors of players within a game system, rather than being predetermined by the game designers. This type of gameplay is often characterized by complex dynamic systems and open-ended rule sets that allow players to create their own experiences and stories within the game world. The sandbox concept is one application of this, and of course, Second Life as a platform is probably the most famous example of encouraging this form of play. So you know all about this. So what do I mean with education? This comes as with a disclaimer. I am not an educator, and I know there is a lot more innovation out there than what I am aware of. It is amazing and humbling to be invited to speak here at the Virtual World's Best Practice in Education conference, which is a community event focusing on education in immersive virtual environments. So I'm at the right place to get educated. My personal frustration with education is the type that delivers content at learners that you are supposed to absorb passively without questioning. It links with how our relationship with absorbing media and news has changed, that we participate in its creation as much as we consume it, the convergence culture, as per Henry Jenkins. On the other hand, as a scientist, how does this approach tally with so-called truth, the facts that we uncover that we believe are immutable? Like climate change or the COVID pandemic, or as Gil IL puts it, politically charged scientific questions. Is this convergence culture compatible with these scientific issues? When is something a sacred cow, not to be touched? Just asking my AI how education is defined, it said education is generally understood as the process of facilitating learning or the acquisition of knowledge, skills, values, and habits. That sounds great. So far, so good. But I then asked, is there a definition that distinguishes between delivering content for absorption and allowing learning through discovery or curiosity. The AI says there is a distinction between education that focuses on transmission of knowledge, where students absorb predefined content, versus a more constructivist approach, where learners are encouraged to discover and construct their own understanding through curiosity-driven inquiry. So I think I'm here specifically talking about the constructivist approach. As hinted by my earlier question, my focus is more on people who are challenging the system, who are vulnerable to misinformation, populism, and radicalization. So let's call it continuing education rather than curriculum education. But of course, the same tools and approaches can be used in formal curricula. Why not? So then that brings us to emergent education. Applying the emergent game context to education can create an ecosystem where creativity can thrive for the learners as well as the educators. This approach shifts the focus to the player or the learner, giving the learner agency to explore and question their world. By focusing on building a playground with relatively open goals and the verbs and game mechanics to find their own fun and solutions to the problems presented. As the ample literature on using Minecraft and virtual worlds for education shows, and the existence of this conference, this is a very promising area for education. But in my view, it's still often a limiting and frustrating experience. We can improve on this in one way by extending the ecosystem beyond a specific platform, making platforms and the data within them interoperable, which I will get into in a bit. If you choose to have your community and or your virtual education platform, for example, in Second Life, and you want to join up with another community in Open Simulator or VR Chat or Minecraft, you should be able to do that. Or if you know you want to check out if you can see the Northern Lights tonight, and then pull in those rays of lights into Second Life to have a watch party, you should be able to do that. That will probably mean integrating the NOAA database into your world, and then I guess do some coding or whatever to something to take the probabilities of the aurora happening, and then maybe link that with some video stream and then convert that to a visualization that is suitable to pull into Second Life. I don't know, but you should be able to do that. Perhaps you have a unique platform developed that is specific to your needs, or someone made an industrial simulation available for education. Those should seamlessly interoperate into your activities or curriculum. And what if you want to touch those light streamers and have your hand change how they flow? Let the ribbons of light weave through your hands like a soft silk fabric and change the physical truth of how the auroras happen. Or use the same type of visualizations to show things you can't really show in the physical world, like the flows of pollution in rivers or the flows of political funding. It's your virtual world. You should be able to do that. And then maybe you think, but what makes this happen? And then you go off into a rabbit hole about magnetic interference and industrial production upstream of rivers or whatever, I don't know. But it's playful and curious. And maybe along this journey, you realize the earth isn't flat after all, or, some big political thing you resolve. And nobody judged you along the way. You were just playing. That's what I want. I don't want a boring lecture or have a fight with someone over if the world is flat or round. Who cares? Come play in the aurora with me. Come change the value of gravity so we can float around together. The third concept is metaplay. I use this more as I reinterpret metagaming. And so in traditional role-playing games, metagaming refers to the use of real-world information that the player character should not know about. A metagame can mean cheating or refer to achievement systems and other official elements outside the actual core game. While the use of the term varies by context, some positive, some negative, the different meanings have in common a reference to something beyond the game itself. I want to use the term metaplay here to claim the positive reference around metagaming and to consider the playing that extends play beyond the game boundaries. Metaplay can refer to the creative and playful activities that can involve the manipulation of game mechanics, pushing boundaries, or experimenting with alternative ways of playing. Metaplay is then the emergent playfulness, beyond what we would typically consider as available for play. There are no sacred cows. Our NOAA database would be an example of metaplay rather than stodgy scientific data stuck in a database somewhere. This conference is an example of Metaplay with Second Life. So then if we consider metagaming for education, I first came across the term metagaming through an article by Juno Kohila's group, where they investigated how school learners engage with games for educational purposes. In their article, A Typology of Metagamers, Identifying Player Types Based on Beyond the Game Activities, Kahila's group look at what happens beyond the game. They talk about three distinct profiles of game players: versatile metagamers, strategizers, and casual metagamers. The authors map the students' metagame activities into the main categories of game-enabling activities, strategizing activities, discussing activities, information-seeking activities, creating and sharing activities, and consuming activities. Important to note here is that it was not expected that all the players engage in gameplay or metaplay in the same ways. It was more emergent about what they could or chose to engage with. Right, so this next part, now that the concepts are covered, the next part is, are there sacred cows? Should truth be the ultimate thing we protect, in this idea of education? I asked earlier as a scientist, should we preserve the truth? Or in other words, how do we engage with politically charged scientific questions that do not have straightforward answers and have a lot of political trade-offs behind them? In our modern world, where Wikipedia was first scoffed at as a resource, then reluctantly embraced, in this convergence culture where content is created by everyone, where the idea of an expert is no longer clear-cut, how do we work with that? More topically, with the current challenges and opportunities with AI, education needs to move from ring-fencing the game of education to teaching how to engage critically with the metagaming wealth of information and misinformation that exists beyond the education sandbox. It's not about the sacred cows. It's not about the truth. It's about how we relate to each other. That does not mean we discard so-called truths, but we need to change how we try to protect those sacred cows. We gain nothing by hurting each other while we try to protect a sacred cow, aka the truth. So this then, to me, leads to addressing the crisis of belonging. The rise of misinformation and a world that has become more angry and divided really, really bothers me. So I set off on this journey to learn how to make it better. What is fueling the need for an alternate truth? Most of what I read seems to point to a crisis of belonging, not a challenge of the truth per se. So does this mean that truth cannot coexist with fun, with play, with belonging? I am a scientist and an engineer, and I work to improve our relationship with nature, to reverse climate change and regenerate our environment. But I have learned that we can't move the needle on that until we improve our relationship with ourselves and each other. If we do not have fun and play and belonging, truth will not survive. So some views on this crisis of belonging links it to a psychology of loss, according to Carol Gilligan. And this psychology of loss links to the politics of patriarchy, of otherness, of us versus them. The rise of populism, of post-truth, can be seen as a fight to preserve this othering mentality. Let's call this the system. The politics of this system that tries to keep us afraid and pushes this us and them mentality we're seeing everywhere is a way to break relationship. Without relationship, we are vulnerable, we are controllable, we can be manipulated. And so, democracy or equality, true belonging, is a threat to patriarchy, to this current system. So how do we break this manipulation of ourselves? Carol Gilligan talks about resisting patriarchy through association, learning to listen in ways that generate trust. Naomi Klein wrote about how to constructively engage with misinformation, and Anand Giridharadas wrote on building connection across political divisions. The one thing that kept coming up was not educating people or improving literacy, but reducing friction by cultivating curiosity. So this talk about education, emerging education, metaplay, is yes about learning, but it's about a specific approach to learning, an approach that builds relationship. I do think digital approaches and virtual worlds have a unique ability to help with that. Maybe it's about looking at the positive aspects of hyperreality. I know I'm preaching to the choir here. And so then we can think about cultivating curiosity rather than literacy. I don't think truth and belonging has to be mutually exclusive, but there is a certain suspension of conviction needed to allow curiosity. And through curiosity, we can recreate belonging. And then, together, we can rediscover truth, perhaps. I suppose it is also worth mentioning that this is a feminist approach, but I hope it's pretty clear that this has nothing to do with men or women. Patriarchy versus feminist being interpreted to mean men versus women is just another us versus them manipulation tactic. Don't fall for it. So, coming to the fourth aspect, emergent education plus metaplay equals curiosity. That is my little sum. Tim Harford has the best quote about the importance of curiosity, quoting work done by Dan Kahan and co-workers. The quote is, "Scientifically literate people, remember, were more likely to be polarized in their answers to politically charged scientific questions, but scientifically curious people were not. Curiosity brought people together in a way that mere facts did not." And so that leads to say, question the sacred cows, be curious about the truth. With the advent of the internet and the proliferation of AI, broadcasting information is less relevant than about playfully introducing cognitive dissonance, effectively training people to follow the scientific method of inquiry, being questioning or curious, without being judgmental about the evidence. Now, as humans, we're not very good at the not being judgmental bit, particularly when it comes to separating the evidence and the person presenting it. So that brings it to my second little sum, that the scientific method of inquiry plus this ethic of care through curiosity and suspending judgment equals a sense of belonging. For the most part, though, being curious is hard. The user interface or user design for curiosity needs improvement. There are many heartwarming examples of people finding amazing information, making new friends, and joining new communities through, for example, Wikipedia rabbit holes or exploring open world games like Second Life. But for the most part, this requires an existing desire or bravery to struggle through many dead ends, boring side quests, or failed attempts to find what you need, facing potential embarrassment and having to suffer through weird ways to navigate information. There is a lack of globally accessible, user-friendly resources for people to find, explore, use, and play with information that could matter to them in a way that makes sense to non-specialists. In my work, I am interested in how we learn and interact with nature, and I believe the virtual world can help visualize our links with nature. And more importantly, cultivate communities of interest, a sense of belonging centered around important issues. And so, after sharing what got me to my current work, it's time to give some thought to how this can be achieved technically. So, part C, the metaverse, interoperability of data. There is a lot out there in terms of using games and virtual worlds for education already. Through, for example, Second Life, Open Simulator, virtual worlds themselves and related community components already exist. I want to focus here on a different aspect of what we consider the metaverse, the interoperability of data. The advances of geospatial mapping and knowledge infrastructures more generally unlocks potential for using physical world assets in games. Using physical world assets in emergent approaches to game design is well suited to allowing players to interact with their game worlds in varied ways. I mentioned that we can improve on this in one way by extending the ecosystem beyond a specific platform, making platforms and the data within them interoperable. So I want to share some thoughts on that now. And I call this heading integrating knowledge infrastructures. The complex goldmine of information available about our interactions with nature is virtually invisible to anyone outside of those professionals directly working with the data. Examples of the complex information are our interactions with natural resources like water or energy, including key characteristics of those resources, the quality and Is the water pure, and so on. The infrastructure that connects these resources to us. How do we get the water, and where does the water go afterwards? And the services nature provides to us. If or when those data is available, it is currently delivered to us as a take it or leave it top-down option that we are expected to passively believe and accept. There's no chance for curiosity, for playing with this data, for contributing our own views or knowledge to this. What's worse, as outsiders, it's hard to even find out how to get help finding the information in the first place. To adapt to a changing world and regenerate our world and our relationships, we need to work together from the bottom up. How can we build a better world together if we can't even see what's going on? Or like play with it. So integrating big data or integrating knowledge infrastructures is an ongoing interest for a group of us. One component of it is the interaction or lack thereof by everyday people, which is where I think the virtual worlds can really shine. And because of the bigness of this data, and one could say the necessity of visualizing it, there is a digital and likely an immersive component to it. The idea of the metaverse that many people have. Imagine schools, libraries, and local government, all potential custodians of the commons, being integrated and accessible to their local citizens, facilitated by open digital frameworks of whatever kinds, whether it's immersive or 2D. The other component is the technical integration of these knowledge infrastructures and the stacks that support them. Informally, we discussed this in the Open Metaverse Interoperability Group, or as I call it, OMI or OMI, and everyone is welcome to join, whatever the metaverse means to you. We are also more formally considering this integration from the urban water management angle in a recent European research project that's just started called AquaSavvy. So, call to action. If this interests you, get in touch. We are looking for community members to join the journey in whatever form works for you. Casual conversations, sharing knowledge, sharing existing work that you know of, building components of this greater ecosystem together. We are also looking for consortium members to pursue research funding or strategic partnerships with companies interested in the commercial potential of these approaches. So how to get in touch? The Open Metaverse Interoperability Group, or OMI, website is omigroup.org. Most of our communication happens on Discord. Rather than copy the link in the chat, it's on the blog post that I shared. And you can contact me. My email address is indiebio@aquasavvy.eu, and I'm basically indiebio everywhere on the internet. Yeah, and so just a little bit more about our collective. As a collective, we are using digital technologies to address the challenge of interacting with complex knowledge ecosystems. We use people-centric technology development to empower informed, accountable action from the bottom up. Using digital, hyper-connected, integrated technologies, what we understand as the metaverse, potentially gives grassroots initiatives the ability to contribute to the growing integrated knowledge ecosystem, or what we say the metaverse ecosystem, and thereby scale their efforts and networks globally. Okay, and then I could just tell you a bit of who I am. My name is Bernelle in the physical world, but I go by the nick of Indie. I'm a biologist by training, and I took a side quest into engineering and ended up in urban resource management. Where I just got incredibly frustrated at how poorly equipped we were to solve any sort of challenges. And so that sort of stumbled me into the metaverse, where I go by indiebio, indie for independent and bio for biology. And my interest in the metaverse is the meta part of it rather than the visual or the virtual. I'm interested in the interoperability of data, cultures, the physical with the digital, basically how everything interrelates, and more importantly, the spaces between, the and between the two things and the gaps that occur. I'm not an educator, but I believe that the digital can do more to supplement curricula and pedagogy, if that's how you say it. And I think the digital can also help lifelong learning beyond formal education and build relationships across difference in ways we haven't even started properly exploring. And so that's me. Thank you very much. Oh, thanks everyone.